So the people that have known me for the last few years know that I talk about how Destiny could be better, and ways that I would suggest fixing it, and not just tiny one-off little suggestions. I'm talking about the mechanics, the game behind the game, the micromanaging, the min-maxing, the character stats, and special abilities that make Destiny, or rather that drew us all to Destiny in the first place. Most of you, like myself, feel that the game has gotten a little repetitive. It's been 6 years of the exact same routine. We switched up between Destiny 1 and Destiny 2, but um, it genuinely feels like nothing was learned from the 3 years of D1 leading into D2. We all started from scratch. And that got me thinking. Um, there has to be some other story. Like, there has to be something else going on. It can't just be that Activision has bound the hands of Bungie, the potentially the most lucrative acquisition they've made in a long time. They put $500 million into launching the series and kept it up for 5 years out of a 10-year intended contract. I genuinely feel like Bungie played a game of chicken. But before we get into all of that, my name is Solsim Mirek. I'm a hunter, self-proclaimed the bowman of destiny. When Forsaken came out, they introduced bows, which reinvigorated my interest because I am a more archaic fighter. I don't know exactly how else to really explain that, but since Forsaken's dropped, I have almost exclusively run dual bows and a sword in just about every scenario that you could possibly think of. Um, and the only time that that's ever really changed is if a raid party really, really, really needed me to change my gear in order for us to get through an encounter. But I mean, I've earned it, I think. And my former clanmates and also my friends, if you would like to chime off in the comments and attest to my claim, feel free. But without further ado, let's get into the meat of what this particular video is about. Recently, Bungie talked about, like in the most recent TWAB, about how their triumphs are going to be reworked. And honestly, the conversation extends a little bit further than that because the triumph system rework, the way that they're talking about it, um, is reminiscent of a suggestion that I made. And that by itself would not be enough to spur me to really do this. But it's really so much that the entirety of Shadowkeep seems to be influenced by unread correspondence from myself to Pete Parsons and Luke Smith. And I know Bungie has a team of 600 people. So, my ideas probably were not the sole reason why the changes happened after the split from Activision, but the timing of my emails is enough to raise suspicion, at least in my mind. And also the changes that were made when they were made, the way that we're approaching stasis, and the restructuring of how that's going to work. The way that the screenshots that we've gotten from both the Behemoth and the Warlock subclass indicate a strong influence from my emails. And I only really give it as much credence as I do because the last 6 years have been what they have. Or rather, the last 5 years have been what they have. And my correspondence was written in such a way and prefaced as such to be ambiguous enough to be adaptable from a legal sense. So I can't really knock them for how they approached the artifact system, which is now basically being shunted over to the Triumph system, because it realistically makes more sense, as my emails will show, to have our advancement based off of the achievements that they throw at us every season, because every season comes with new triumphs. So our progression, while yes, we have our gear and our weapons, our end game progression, which I think is the direction that they're going based off of the TWAB, should really be based off of those triumphs and the points that we earn therein, which is where the career score and the active score is coming in, which is why I say it's the artifact system being like it was shunted from the artifact system, or it evolved out of the artifact system. The way that we pursue things, though, the way that we've been conditioned to go after rewards in Destiny since its inception, and really in the last 2 years, since we have this new ecosystem in place, everything feels, for lack of a better word, superfluous. It's all the same mechanics. It's the same issue. We're overwhelmed by numbers, and even though we're told that we're gaining in power, things seem harder than they were when we first started in some instances. We don't benefit from as much of a difference in our light anymore, and I could attribute that mechanically or lore wise to the presence of the pyramid ships and the fact that we're being tempted towards the darkness, which is dimming our light. So we're not given as much of a benefit over our enemies as we approach beyond light. Mechanically, that, I mean, I guess that makes sense. It's just a really weird design decision in such a critical moment. The way that we've been discouraged from acting independently, even though lore wise, and a lot of my gripes with Destiny at this current point stem from the fact that the mechanics do not match the lore, and it's not that hard to do it. Example being, back in the days of Taken King, there was a portion of the story where you infiltrated Crota's throne world during his funeral to steal some of his essence to become Ascendant Hive, or at least be acknowledged as Ascendant Hive, so we could challenge Oryx. Now, this entire mission was done in stealth. They introduced an entire sensory range mechanic for the Hive where you had to navigate essentially what was like it was exactly the raid. The same raid, the Dark Below Crota's End raid. You were going through that very same instance or that very same area in permanent cloak. And there were these sensor ranges that you would be detected in. Now, that was a one-off mission that we never saw a mechanic from again, save for Night Stalkers being able to cloak. But that was something that Blade Dancers could do back in D1 that Arcstriders are incapable of. Yet, we have this meta, or this rhetoric around how best to manage powers and who needs to be nerfed and what needs to be buffed. And if I'm not mistaken, Bungie built Destiny, or pushed Destiny, as becoming legend, building our power, building our light, growing in strength. The entire rhetoric of Callus during the season of Opulence was growing fat with strength, growing fat with light, growing fat with power, just so that we could face what was coming, which is the darkness. Now, if the goal is to make us feel powerful, or to allow us to be strong or feel that strength, why are we stuck with these quartets for subclasses in the wake of what we had in D1? And why is it so difficult to fathom how you would adapt them going forward and beyond light with 600 people on board? Now, as this channel progresses, I will go into more detail on how I plan to restructure each of the classes, but this particular one, we're going to focus on the triumphs and what stasis is looking like going forward and how it pertains to the emails that I sent back in January of 2019, just before we found out that Bungie and Activision were going their separate ways. I will throw them up on screen, but this is the portion of the email, January 3rd, 2019. Hoping to reach you in regards to Destiny's progression going forward. The Triumph system is flawed. Much of the community views them as lucky/bragging rights. Without a more tangible reward system, most of the community won't pursue them, preferring to unlock them organically, if at all. Consider tying the progression of weapon categories and/or frames, i.e. auto rifles, to improve base rate of fire, sniper rifles to improve base range, shotguns to improve base impact, etc., and give them a set percentage increase at 100, 250, 500 kills, boosted gains for precision kills and streaks. Similar tracking reward systems could also be applied to supers, grenades, and melees, improving cooldown, damage, and inventory. This approach should work to empower all Guardians regardless of playstyle, allowing players to step away from the meta, preventing the need for game balance. Of course, Crucible should remain unaffected, as narratively Shaxx suppresses our power inside Crucible arenas. Saladin's unshackling for Iron Banner, however, would hold more weight, being the only exception to these Crucible limitations. Now, that was on January 3rd. And if I'm not mistaken, that was before we had the rework of staggered unlocks for our triumphs. The multi-stage triumphs, the ones that, unlock at 100 pistol kills, 100 scout rifle kills, 100 bow kills, and stacking those up to a final point. I could be wrong. My timeline could be messed up, and I ask you to correct me in the comments if you have any evidence of this being a thing before January 3rd of 2019 in Destiny 2. Because I know that was something that was on the Grimoire cards of D1, but they genuinely had this in a system. Like, this was a system that they had in place before that they abandoned for Destiny 2 for some strange reason and just never brought back. Additionally, to support the claim that Shadowkeep's seasonal content had nothing to do with Saint, that was completely left field for me. I had nothing, that was all Bungie. But specifically the season of, I believe it was the Worthy, where we were dealing with Rasputin and all of the Seraph Towers, and also this new power in Beyond Light. This email was written and sent on January 20th, 2019, right after we found out that Bungie and Activision were separating because Activision had a vote of no confidence because of the underperformance of Bungie, which is something we'll talk about on another day. But hello again, Mr. Parsons. In light of recent news, I'd like to suggest a narrative tilt to explain the mechanical changes that could manifest as early as year 3 and beyond, taking note of the Comet DLC placeholder as a reference to the effect it will have on gameplay. The World of Destiny, written January 20th of 2019, acknowledging that most of 2019 is well established at that point. This is what I suggested as a narrative tilt for the entirety of 2020, or rather just the future of Bungie. Tower scanners pick up an object at the edge of the system, approaching at high speed. Zavala suspects it to be a mere comet and believes it will get tangled in the debris of the reef. Asher counters that no mere comet would give off energy readings on such a scale, theorizing that this thing would likely obliterate anything short of the Traveler, which it appears to be headed straight for. Just then, Anna Bray reports Rasputin is behaving oddly aggressive, launching a new set of satellites across the system, including several automated weapons to the last city. Failsafe expresses concern for the Vanguard's safety given its history of conflict, and moments later, as Zavala begins to scramble fighters and alert ground forces, a barrage of Rasputin's satellites land outside the east wall, and several more in the still ruined sections of the last city. As they land, each deploy what appear to be anti-air cannons, focus in a similar trajectory, and begin firing concussive blasts into the distance. Everyone at the tower looks on in shock and surprise as the object from the edge of the system enters Earth's atmosphere with one shattering boom after another, as concussive rounds seemingly wash over the object, each shot making it smaller until it vanishes. Now, I know that this isn't exactly how the whole season of Rasputin played out, but launching satellites all across the system was the purpose of an entire season, to stop something that was on collision course with the Traveler. They just so happened to relabel it the Almighty because that was something that narratively made more sense, but you could see where my thinking could be founded in reality. The amount of developmental growth we've seen from Bungie since the launch of Destiny back in 2014, despite all of the begging and pleading and suggestions from the community. Granted, there have been no mechanical suggestions as far as I've seen that were put forward. There's merely requests for things to return from Destiny 1. If there has actually been work being done at Bungie this entire time, it's been on something completely different than what we've been playing. Because justifying 600 people putting out what we currently have and what we've gotten this year, it's disappointing for the pedigree that Bungie has established for itself over its history. Its competitors, by comparison, the Division 2 and Warframe are the ones that most readily come to mind, have made leaps and bounds, large strides in terms of player engagement, ability, functionality, and sense of power passed along, far exceed what we have in Destiny, even though I truly believe from a lore standpoint a Guardian would trounce a Warframe. I doubt mechanically that a Guardian could even take down an Agent. And that's based purely off of the fact that supers take so long to build up and they're gone so quickly. They might catch a few people, but in a situation or in an instance where everybody can resurrect, the Guardians that we play as they're not dangerous. They're formidable, but even in our own universe, we get overwhelmed and wrecked regularly by things that we're supposed to be a scourge to. Like we are death to a lot of our enemies as Guardians. We are an end all be all. We're powerhouses. We are things to be feared. Yet every yellow bar can take us out with a stomp of their feet. Most knights can walk up and just cleave us in half. Yeah, we get back up, but when we're so easy to knock down, it's barely that much of a threat. I think the community would benefit a lot from an increase in power. I have the path by which we can achieve that, uh, but apparently I need more traction in order for Bungie to actually pay attention. So I understand this has been long-winded, and I appreciate everybody for sticking around to this point. And in the future, I intend to be posting more videos and having look forward to having discussions with you all in the comments about suggestions, modifications, or alterations to the ideas that I have for this game going forward into the future and hopefully into perpetuity. I thank you for your time, and until next we speak, stay safe out there, Guardians, and stay blessed.